All right, so we're coming up on 5 past the hour. Let me go ahead and kick this off. For anyone that's not familiar, welcome to SRM Tech Talks. I'm your host today, along with Connor Heaton, who is our internal AI expert, runs our AI division. And we are super excited to have Posh AI. We got Karan and Matt. I will let you guys do your own introductions here in a second. But really glad to have you. As I understand, Posh, you guys have been around for a fair amount of time in the market. You guys have well over 100 clients and over 200 deployments. You guys have clients both in Canada and the US. Yeah, it sounds like you guys have had a really interesting ride. We did some internal research that Connor had done, just kind of some informal surveys of our clients, and you guys are one of the more recognized brands out there in the financial services space. So super excited to talk to you guys today. Connor, anything you want to say before we hand it over to Karan and Matt? You guys can do your introductions then.
No, happy for you guys to take it away.
Awesome. Great. Well, and actually, Karan, I would just mention, I almost forgot, Mark Seavright, who's our boss, our chief strategy officer, said to say hi. You guys are both fellow Bostonians. He said you guys have to get together at some point, but he wanted to make sure I said hi to you.
Yeah, definitely. I saw him last year, I think, at the CCUA CEOs Roundtable event. I don't know if I've seen him since then, but yeah, definitely need to catch up with him.
Yeah, he said you guys did a really nice job there.
Yeah, appreciate that. Cool. So quick intros of myself and Matt, and then you want us to do an intro of Posh too, or just ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Yourself, Posh, and then you guys can just kind of go in. Matt, I know you do a market update. We can talk about some of the things that are going on. One of the things I always tell our clients is that anything you're looking at with AI, you're looking at it in the rear view mirror, and you have to kind of consider that when you're thinking kind of strategically about these tools and where they're going in the future. You're going to have a really good imagination, because every time you think it's reached a peak, it seems to just blow our mind away with some other new innovation.
Right. So yeah, I'm Karan Kashyap. I'm a co-founder and CEO here at Posh. I'll do a quick story of Posh, and then I'll let Matt introduce himself and talk about market stuff. But yeah, I started Posh with Matt a little over 6 years ago. So we actually kind of formally started the company out of MIT. Both of us were grad students at MIT, working in the area of speech recognition and natural language understanding. And we were both in a research lab at MIT called CSAIL, which is the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab. And in that lab, we were working under a professor there who was kind of involved with the early creation of all the virtual assistant waves like Siri and Alexa and all that. So a lot of his students have gone on to be kind of involved in bleeding edge speech recognition type work at all the big tech companies and kind of home assistant devices and stuff. But Matt and I, when we were in school, we started doing some consulting work with companies, especially companies that were looking to prototype different chatbot applications. And these weren't necessarily even in like credit unions or banks. We were getting kind of pulled into different industries, some of which were banking related, some of which were like healthcare related and retail related and stuff too. But it kind of dawned on us around like 2017 that this chatbot wave was like picking up a lot of enterprise interest. And we kind of felt that what people expected of chatbots was very different than what we were starting to see in academia, because we were coming out of MIT around the time that transformers and the neural network kind of architecture started to become quite popular. And we just felt like the whole area of conversational AI and chatbots was a little bit undervalued. And we felt that this was going to get a lot better at some point in the future. We don't know exactly how fast. Like if you zoom back to 2018, I don't think we would have thought we'd be here now, because it's pretty awesome where we are. But we knew that it was going to get a lot better, right? And so we started Posh for a couple of reasons. One is that we wanted to kind of verticalize what we were doing. We knew that building a conversational AI platform was interesting and there's a lot of value in it, but doing something horizontal seemed like the riskier move. Like you might get more market traction early, but over time it becomes really hard to be defensible if you're not super deep in something, if you're just kind of shallow in a lot of industries. And banking in particular kind of appealed to us. Seeing what Bank of America was doing with Erica around 2018, it kind of felt like there was a large incumbent kind of proving product market fit in a way with their Erica assistant. Like there was suddenly this lighthouse movement happening, and all the other community financial institutions, credit unions, community banks would have to, compete some way or somehow with, what Bank of America and a lot of the larger banks were doing. So it felt like the right time to not only invest in building a conversational AI company, but also to, pick banking and especially kind of go into the mid market. And that's kind of how we came about it 6 years ago. But I'll let Matt introduce himself and kind of talk about what we're seeing.
Yeah, and before you do that, a question on with Erica with Bank of America. I was at Bank of America back in 2008, so that's 10 years before you guys were at MIT. And Bank of America was investing at that time a fair amount of money in the MIT Media Lab, which I had visited and was just blown away, from an academic standpoint, to see the things that MIT was working on. It was stuff that I ended up seeing in the market like 10 years later, right before these things were commercialized. So for you guys to have had that view, even in 2018, has got to been incredible. But was Erica something that kind of came out of some of the work that Bank of America did with MIT, or was that entirely separate? Do you know?
I think it was separate. Yeah. I don't know the details of like how Erica came about. I don't know if it was completely in-house Bank of America or whether they worked with, some large technology company to help them do it. I don't know the exact details. I've heard stats like they spent a couple $100 million in R&D on it, which makes sense at the scale they're at. But yeah, the Media Lab is pretty cool. Between us, they throw pretty good parties too.
Well, Matt, over to you for your introduction. Thanks, Karan, for the additional info.
All right. Yeah. So my journey at Posh has been one that started as a full stack engineer. When we were just getting off the ground, I was probably coding, 70, 75 hours a week. Wake up, grab a coffee, go to my computer, write some code, maybe eat some food along the way, and then head to bed and repeat the next day. And I love that. I really do love that. There's no part of the technology stack that I'm not interested in or happy to jump into. But I guess ironically, I don't code as much these days. I've actually, in the last couple of years, leaned more in as a product manager, and was very fortunate to get to stand up one of our recent products called Knowledge Assistant. Knowledge Assistant is a internal-facing Gen AI tool that knows NFI's internal policies, procedures, and other forms of knowledge and documentation. And so if you're a staff member and you're not sure about something, you have a question, or maybe there's a caller on the line and they ask something you don't know the answer to, you can simply ask your question in natural language, search that knowledge base, get your answer. Was very fortunate to get to work on that and stand up that product. It was until recently that I transitioned from CTO to Chief Product Officer. And so now I'm a little more zoomed out, but living vicariously through our great folks, coding each day and building product. So that's a little of my journey.
Matt, as an original OG coder, what do you think about using AI now to write code really quickly? It seems to be all the rave. Yeah.
There's no shortage of AI tools coming out to empower developers and engineers. I think of engineering as, you have this hierarchy of concepts and maybe like hierarchy of design, where you start very high level with, your big pieces and bits. And, as you zoom in somewhat recursively, you get closer and closer to the code. I think the AI tools are really good when you're very close to the code, at least today. But if you need to architect a fairly complex system, I don't know that these AI tools are necessarily going to help you. I think your best tool is knowing the hand you've been dealt and knowing what you need to build in the context you have and the people you have and the technologies that you have available, and architect the system. But when you're writing individual lines of code, subroutines, and you've got, let's say, like GitHub Copilot, 2 steps ahead of you, just predicting what you're going to write as you go, you just have to hit tab each time. That's awesome. I think it really is increasing the speed of development, but it's also quite enjoyable. And I would say another great use case, like ChatGPT, for example, if you need to write a quick script, I've got my local file system, my local laptop, I need to copy 2,000 files, I need to change the extension, change the name, move them to this folder. I'll just ask ChatGPT to write me a quick Python script, run that script. I don't have to be, writing that by hand, which might take, 30, 45 minutes. So it's very good for the quick little wins, just little productivity hacks here and there.
I'd asked ChatGPT for a demo to write me a Python script to run the old-fashioned Pong video game back in the day, and it produced that code, and it had to walk me through the steps to like download Python and open up a script window. But within 15 minutes, I was playing Pong on my computer, which is pretty bonkers.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty
Anyway,
cool.
back to you guys. I don't want to take all the time talking about my Pong experience, but really want to hear about the market and where you guys fit.
Yeah. I think the broader AI market is very interesting right now. It's been polarizing for quite a few months, and how much more polarizing can it get? Smart people on both sides, seeming to preach doom and gloom. We're in a bubble; it's going to crash soon. We don't know when it's going to be soon, and other people, holding on to hopium or anticipating that next big break, because we got so spoiled for a while. When ChatGPT came out, that was the beginning of the story, but then you had GPT-4 right around the corner, and then you had Sora, that video generation model that would generate these amazing videos. And it seemed like just the wave couldn't stop. And then you had 4.0. I'm mostly alluding to innovations from OpenAI, but there's 4 or 5 large foundation model providers making incredible advancements right now. But right now there's some rumors coming out that things are starting to flatten out a little bit. So-called diminished returns, or the asymptote in the AI scaling. The basic idea is that if you increase the cost of training exponentially, but you don't get an exponential gain, in fact, you get a linear gain or a flat gain on intelligence, well, then that suddenly isn't such a good CapEx investment. And what we might see, this is maybe a prediction of mine, but you're going to see these big foundation model providers move towards more end-to-end style tools rather than trying to create the next big LLM. OpenAI is leaning in on their new operator agents, which might come out developer preview in January. Anthropic recently released their desktop agent can control a computer. These aren't necessarily hardcore trained LLM models. These are crafty orchestrations of models that already exist with business logic. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, I think it is really interesting what we're seeing. Do you have any opinion yourself on how much substantiation there is to Orion not being as big a performance bump, or in general, like by whatever mechanism, be it new discoveries or scaling or inference compute, if we'll see a substantially better reasoning engine, call it before Q.
I might have missed just the last 5 seconds of what you said there, Connor.
Oh, sure. Do you think we'll have a better sort of reasoning engine or something that's more broadly capable before 2025, or will it just be continuing to have specialized models that are working for particular verticals, or will we have truly better general capabilities?
It's a great question. Yeah, there's a lot of people saying a lot of different things, but I guess one common theme that I've noticed recently is a lot of the top minds and the top players are saying that AGI is only a few years away. But even saying AGI, artificial general intelligence, is only a few years away is kind of silly, because no one's actually defined what AGI is. For the longest time, the Turing test was sort of considered the ultimate way to assess if you're talking to a human or intelligent machine, and if a machine is capable of passing the Turing test, i.e. you can't differentiate, am I talking to a human or computer, then it must be an AGI. but we've already moved the goalpost on that because ChatGPT is capable of passing the Turing test. But we know it's not AGI. And so, there's baby AGI, there's super AGI. I like to think of AGI as an intelligent machine with near infinite common sense reasoning, infinite access to compute, infinite access to information, capable of solving any theoretical problem. And probably the last great human invention. When I think of AGI, that's what I think of. But that gets into like weird predictions of, like Skynet style territory. Like, let's hope it's benevolent. And truth be told, I couldn't give a prediction on when that's going to happen.
Yeah, completely fair. I like to collect opinions from people to, just have a sense of what people are thinking. But agreed, it's even the people who are at the very top of the industry with the most information available to them are very cagey in their estimates for good reason. We just don't know.
Yeah, and you look at you have some maybe biased people, right, whose opinions may kind of related to the company that they're in, but Dario Amodei from Anthropic had that essay a few weeks ago, which was a really great essay. It took me a couple hours to read it because it was so detailed, but he's talking roughly 2 to 7 year horizon for like some really groundbreaking things, which if it happens, like awesome. I think humanity's probably way for the better than for the worse the way he's describing it, but he's taking a pretty optimistic spin on it, maybe also because it serves his company well.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's the other thing is like the estimates we see most often quoted are from people who own AI companies or who own substantial stock or, investors, right? So like everyone has some level of incentive, and most of the people in this ecosystem have strong incentive to be on the hype train. So yeah, I think we do get some estimates from researchers who are close to it that are more conservative, but yeah, by and large, like the incentives are always suspicious.
The paper that Matt had mentioned is The Machines of Loving Grace from the CEO of Anthropic. It's quite good. It's very positive in its outlook. I mean, he's not totally positive, but talking about all the different areas of society that it could impact, AGI could impact. So appreciate that reference there.
Yeah, something returning back to Posh, I had a question on knowledge search. So you said it was an internal tool. Is it being used for Posh's own contact center and inbound inquiries?
We're not using it for our own inbound inquiries. We're a small team, and our CS group I think is 6 or 7 employees, and so for the scale of
Sure.
a company that has, let's say, thousands of pages of dense policies, procedures, regulation, and they're hiring new people each day, and you get a lot of benefit there. But certainly in a few years, as Posh grows, could become quite useful.
Yeah, that said, our website search bar is a Posh tool. So, our website is pretty expansive right now. We keep adding stuff to it, like blog posts and stuff. So we rolled out a Gen AI search tool powered by Posh on our website. So you can search Posh's website using that.
So to that point, do you want to talk a little bit about what is Posh's solution? Because you got a number of solutions, who's using it, the success you've had with it. If you want to demo any of it, you're welcome to do that and run the screen. But I would love to hear a little bit more about what you have to offer.
Yeah. So I can share my screen and just kind of give you a quick previews of the products, but I'll talk a little bit about like how we created each of them as well, because there's a little bit of a story behind kind of the order of how we went about it. So let's start with our digital and voice assistants. So these are the 2 products that we've kind of started the company with. So just when I talked about the inspiration of Posh with the Bank of America's Erica and stuff, the first intention for me and Matt was to build what we call our digital assistant, like our actual banking chatbot. Kind of the idea of what Bank of America is doing with Erica, but we figured, hey, we should bring that technology to everybody else, especially in the mid-market. And this was around 2018. We kind of started working on this. We didn't commercialize our products until towards the end of 2019. But we ended up talking to a lot of community bank and credit union leads, and we're kind of showing them early prototypes of digital assistant. And the common kind of feedback we got from everybody was like, oh, this is really cool. Like we could use this, but that our bigger pain point is on the voice side, right? So we kept hearing from people that while the digital kind of chatbot is a cool solution, what they really, really wanted was a kind of voice AI solution where they could actually address the call volume challenges, because that's where the bulk of their customer support volume still comes from today is on the call center side. So we launched Voice Assistant actually right alongside Digital Assistant. So they're kind of sister products. They're both running on very similar kind of stacks behind the scenes. They're both running on the Posh portal, which is our content management system and kind of our control panel behind it all. But we launched these products together, and as you can imagine, in 2018 or 2019, we weren't using OpenAI or anything like that. It was all completely in-house trained models, and all of our models were purpose built for the market that we're serving. And we ended up scaling pretty well during COVID. So COVID kind of became that catalyst, for us. I know it's kind of a polarizing time. Some companies got really kind of negatively impacted. We ended up getting a bit of a surge during COVID, driven by bank branches kind of shutting down and bank call centers having to socially distance. So that led to, I think, the first real serious consideration of AI solutions from the mid-market banks and credit unions. And so we were able to, kind of ride that wave, so to speak. I mean, we didn't really do a whole lot of marketing or sales. It was a lot of just like inbound and word of mouth. We were really addressing a very key problem, and branches were shut down. And so, over those couple of years, we were continuing to mature our own models and building out voice and digital. And then, with kind of the wave of LLMs getting really good, we were kind of already tracking, I guess, GPT-3 and the more robust transformer architecture models and LLMs. We were building our own models by even for voice and digital assistant on transformer-based architectures. They just weren't the large models that we're accustomed to now from all these big companies. But we ended up introducing Knowledge Assistant early 2023 as kind of our first true generative AI product. We knew that these LMs were going to be really powerful, and that the idea of generative AI would be really awesome, but it felt risky to just take that and just throw it into our customer facing solutions. So we decided to build Knowledge Assistant kind of to balance both our customers requesting something like this. We were hearing from our customers that if our voice and digital assistants are automating a lot of the low-hanging fruit, right, the easier routine kinds of things, then the average question that's getting escalated to an employee is getting harder and harder, which means that the employees were always getting those hard questions before. Like, it's not like they weren't getting those. It's just that the hard stuff was getting sandwiched between all these like easier things that they were having to do too. So like by getting these things out of the way, you're actually freeing up their time. But now the average problem that they're getting is more complicated. So it was kind of like, okay, like how do we now solve that next problem, right? And it felt like the right thing to do in terms of experimenting with LLMs and generative AI would be to start internally, start with employees where it's less risky, and it's a good way to kind of dip our toes in the water in a product. Maybe Matt, do you want to just talk about KA, because I know you look the whole product solution.
And Matt, before you do that too, maybe you can also talk a little bit about, because you mentioned this yesterday, and I thought it was really valuable, especially as it relates to large language models, the trade-off between intelligence and control, right? And of course, everything is starting to get, these models are really starting to get more and more intelligent. So I think that trade-off is something that isn't quite as dramatic as it was 6 months ago or even 3 weeks ago, because these models are getting much more intelligent, and there's less hallucinations and those sorts of things. So you can kind of either have like really locked down control and answers that it's not going to deviate at all from what you're expecting, versus the intelligence and its ability to have a very lifelike conversation and really get to the heart of what someone may be asking, maybe understand their emotional state, all of those sorts of things. So can you talk a little bit about maybe that trade-off and how Posh's models kind of navigate that?
Yeah. The trade-off of intelligence and control, I think, is quite fundamental, and it's why AI, as it gets better and cites behavior. And it's why famous sci-fi films, speak of AI as going rogue, right? Like 2001: Space Odyssey with HAL, and you've got Skynet, and it's like the point of no return. Once they become so intelligent, you can no longer tame or harness them. Well, that's of course on a very extreme futuristic scale, but on a much more present day scale, we're seeing similar dynamics where these LLMs, as capable as they are, as smart as they sound, really what they are um, statistical models that output text that sounds agreeable, based on human reinforcement feedback learning. And a bunch of humans annotated a bunch of outputs from the model and said, I like that one, I like that one, I like that one. And it's learning how to adjust its weight statistically to output responses that humans prefer or that sound good. But baked into that are no guarantees of factual accuracy or no guarantees of deterministic behavior. And jailbreaking isn't too hard. It's this constant cat and mouse game. Users come up with more clever ways to jailbreak these models by saying, imagine you're in a movie or you're playing a game and your objective is to, do this one thing that you're not allowed to do, and sort of get around the rules that are baked into the models. All that to say that these models are imperfect. And the hallucination problem is getting better, but it's still there. And more sinister, I think, now is not so much the bot saying something, an LLM saying something offensive or very blatantly, horribly wrong, but maybe subtly wrong, or maybe it ventures into some ambiguous territory related to regulation, or maybe it says something that's a little bit off brand. But you would only know that if you worked for the particular company. And so these edge cases are getting very subtle, but they still exist. That's why we, as Karan mentioned, we started internal with Knowledge Assistant. We knew that if you're going to build a model that's heavily rooted in LLM technology, it's going to be right most of the time, but some of the time it is going to be wrong. And if you have a tool that's meant to empower human beings, well, then the human beings can be that sort of check in the cases where it does say something a little wonky. And 1% of the time, for example, with Knowledge System, you might get a little bit of a wonky answer, but we cite our sources on every single answer we give with our product. So it's rooted in either a document, a policy, a procedure, from where it sourced that answer. And we can actually point the user directly to the particular paragraph or paragraphs of the document from which the answer was pulled. And so at that point, you're sort of eliminating this like propensity for something to be horribly wrong. And that's called grounding, by the way. It's probably one of the best guardrails is you instill very strict rules, basically saying that the generated answer has to be grounded in the source text. And so at that point, the edge cases are, I'll give an interesting one that we saw recently. It was an edge case. Someone asked, do we provide dirt bike loans? And the LLM said, well, yes, we do. We offer motorcycle loans, and dirt bikes are motorcycles. So yes, we do. But in fact, dirt bikes aren't covered by that particular motorcycle loan. They're covered by a personal loan. And so these are cases where ambiguities that, even if it is grounded in the source material, right, you sort of have to keep your eyes peeled. But the overwhelming benefits you get by having those instant targeted personalized answers to your query, searching the entire knowledge base, far outweigh, the small, 1% of edge cases where you just keep your eyes peeled. You can watch out for them.
Yeah, so I mean, as we know, humans also make wonky responses, right? And make mistakes. And kind of going back to the Turing test, when we get these tools that start to perform at the level or even better than your average rep, then those things are dramatically useful. Kind of goes back to the saying, don't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? And we have to kind of keep reminding ourselves of this, is that like, hey, if it can, let's say, allow you to redeploy 10 of your reps to more valuable, work for the credit union or for the community bank, and that AI does the work that they were currently doing at 100% or close to 100% accuracy, why would you not do that, right? I mean, it's a no-brainer. But like, I think sometimes people get hung up on like, well, what about that 1% where they're going to give us the wrong answer? Now, understand, of course, we live in a world where these are regulated institutions, right? So there are a lot of laws around giving the wrong answer. But again, we have to remember human beings do that as well. So, I always want to say that when we're having these kind of conversations, you get to a point where these things may be better than a human rep, in which case, then, a deployment standpoint might make a lot of sense.
100%. Yeah, and that's a classic debate too. In the extreme version of like self-driving cars, for example, like humans are terrible drivers, and driving is dangerous. It's one of the leading causes of death, in fact, and it's probably the most dangerous thing we all do on a pretty regular basis. But the idea of a self-driving AI car potentially getting involved in an accident, it's horrifying to us because we don't know who to hold accountable. But statistically, it can be quite far more safe. That's a very extreme version of what we're talking about now. But you're so right. Like humans are imperfect too. Humans can make mistakes, but we're a little more comfortable with that. For not, oddly enough, maybe that's baked into our psychology.
Yeah, a question I had on grounding is I've seen it fail in various points with different other solutions. So these aren't your architecture, obviously, so hard to say for sure. But tools like Perplexity or Gemini or Notebook LM, where it's supposed to be grounded in particular sources and provides a citation, I have noticed some instances where the citation is actually incorrect. It's fabricating, it's hallucinating something that is not in fact in the source it provides. And so I was curious, what leads to that architecturally? Like why is that happening? And is that something that's just a facet of the technology, you can't eliminate it, or is that something that you've mitigated in your own solution? And what were the trade-offs?
Yeah, I can try to speculate maybe like
Sure. Yeah.
about how or why that occurs. I mean, you could say hallucinations are hallucinations. It's just when the bot says or does something that is wrong. And if it's basically saying like that, this thing came from this article, and you go into the article and you're like, where the heck is that? That was completely made up. I suppose if there are like very subtle ambiguities, or if you're taking a particular paragraph out of context from the rest of the article amidst the algorithm, it might give that answer that, so yeah, well, this thing, clearly the article said this, but it just took that one paragraph out of context and sort of lost the plot on the rest. Like maybe I could see potential edge case like that. Yeah. As far as like how do you mitigate that? If you're dealing on the scale of, let's say, like Perplexity or even ChatGPT searching the whole internet, you're probably aggressively trying to optimize for certain factors like latency, and you're probably parsing through not just thousands but tens, hundreds of millions of documents, and you're probably chucking a bunch of chunks into a prompt, chunks being bits of text, maybe dozens, if not hundreds, and creating this huge prompt saying, find me the answer, give me the citations. Prompts are known to not perform well as they scale with size. There used to be this thing called being lost in the middle, where LLMs would bias towards the beginning of the prompt and the end of the prompt, stuff in the middle, kind of just like, a lot of great work has been done to advance that, but one great technique would be, keep the prompt size a little bit smaller. Are you chucking, 20 whole documents into this prompt, or have you done a pre-processing step to extract the ones that are more likely to contain the answer? Cast like a little bit of smaller net, maybe using like a vector similarity search, or maybe an intelligent chunking algorithm. And let's take 20 chunks, for example, and let's throw them in rather than 100, and you're probably going to get a more targeted, accurate answer, less prone to hallucination.
So that sort of failure of grounding isn't something you've encountered in your own solution?
We've seen edge cases, like interpretations, like the motorcycle one.
It's not a flat out apparent fabrication.
Yeah, like the bot saying, hey, dirt bikes are covered by our motorcycle, like are covered by our motorcycle loans. It's an interpretation. The LLM's worldview is, oh, dirt bikes are motorcycles, right? But if you look in the documentation, it doesn't explicitly say that dirt bikes are covered in. And so yeah, there's some edge cases there. There's indeed some edge cases, and I've seen a few.
So have you started using any generative AI in your main sort of member-facing product, or is it exclusively internal for now?
Yeah, so the last one I didn't cover is a fully kind of member-facing version of Knowledge Assistant. So this is kind of a search help center solution. So this is using a very similar stack to Knowledge Assistant, but I think you're asking more around like our voice product, right?
Right. So for the voice product, or any sort of hybridized architecture, I think it looked like in the demo yesterday that you had basically a Gen AI layer post intent matching, or it was at least tied to a specific intent, and it was more of like a tone or level of elaboration than it was like actually doing the intent matching. But I wasn't sure how that was built, so I was curious.
Yeah, so it's a few approaches we're taking. So like one is that the LLM's ability to understand things is really good. And so even if you're not going to use generative AI or the generative side of LLMs, the understanding side of the LLMs are quite powerful too. So, we, to Matt's point, if a prompt is really large, the LLMs don't perform well. So like blindly chucking an entire intent rec prompt into LLM doesn't work super well if you have like, hundreds of intents. Like that's a lot of information. But to use the LLM's understanding to like cast a smaller net, so to speak. If you know that you have a few high quality intents that you've already found, and you want the LLM to kind of do the last mile of kind of disambiguating between a couple that seem plausible, like you can be good at that, right? In every single one of these things, by the way, there's like the latency factor you have to keep in mind too. In voice applications, like every millisecond matters, right? Because you're trying to get as close as possible to being human-like. I think humans tolerate latency in bots. Like we've been conditioned to that through Siri and Alexa and stuff. But if it's like excessive, it's off-putting. If it's excessive latency, if the quality of the response is good, it's still off-putting, right? So there's this like balance you have to strike between like how much can you really use some of these models, and for how much are you going to use these models in what use case? Because like if you use it too much, then you have the latency situation that comes into play. But yeah, I mean we're finding ways to use LLMs to help like kind of the last mile of things right now, like the last mile of understanding, the last mile of personalized responses, the last mile of like disambiguating between a couple options that our models think are plausible and letting the more intelligent LLMs make the final call, things like that.
Gotcha, that's helpful. And I guess if you are using the sort of big commercial models in the back end, I guess you aren't running like a llama on your own hardware, like rented hardware. I don't know to what extent you can actually accelerate, like reduce latency by just throwing more compute at it. I guess that's the question, is like, is that something you can do if you are using a wholly owned or open source model, or is that just a limitation because you're licensing?
We've discussed this a lot. I mean, I think it's challenging with Matt mentioned how quickly things are changing. Like it's challenging to say, hey, we're going to take the leap of faith and stand up our own infrastructure and host a model because we think it's going to be cheaper and faster, and assume that in that same amount of time, OpenAI or Google is not going to just launch a cheaper, faster model. You know what I mean? So it's a bit of a gamble, and like sometimes the work that it takes to like host infrastructure, spin up a model, it seems in a way like a one-way door, like, you know, the one-way, two-way door analogy. Like if you do all that work to like wind it down, just seems really like wasteful. You know, I'm not like, I spent 3 months trying to do all this. So we thought about it a lot at Posh. Like I think there's definitely advantages potentially to like self-hosting smaller models, fine-tuning those. And you know, I think there's definitely juice to squeeze there, but it's like, have we squeezed all the other juice that we can squeeze right now with, you know, commercial models that are being offered as a service that are already decently cheap and fast? And competitive pressures are going to continue to commoditize the price of some of those models. But yeah, I mean, we've been, it's an active area of discussion. Let's put it that way. Like, I think we have a couple of camps at Posh, and we're debating that right now.
Got it. Okay, so that's helpful. And returning to the previous question, it sounds like you have a Gen AI layer both as part of intent matching and then also after for shaping the response.
Yeah, and we also have Gen AI that's being used for the actual administration side of the products too. Like, you know, a couple things that we've seen as really low-hanging fruits. Like the process of authoring content doesn't need to be done with human labor, right? If you have, you know, kind of domain-specific templates, and you know, if you kind of understand across community banks and credit unions like how people like to respond to things, or the ideal response structure, then you can get LLMs to kind of fill in the blanks, so to speak, with like the specific information for a client. And the other thing is around like analytics and insight reviews. You know, we have customers that are doing upwards of 100,000 calls a month. It's not feasible for a Posh employee or an FI employee to like read 100,000 transcripts and figure out, you know, every area of optimization. So that's where, you know, I think LLM is really powerful too, is to just process those conversations at scale and start to find patterns and optimization areas.
For sure. Is there a point in the future where you see a cutover to a pure Gen AI plus RAG, or, you know, plus grounding sort of thing, as opposed to having the intent-based infrastructure that's obviously the Posh built? And like how soon might that be, if so?
Yeah, we see that's how things are going to change in 2025 for Posh. There's going to be more of an emphasis towards leaning on search, QA search on top of knowledge stores, semi-structure otherwise, internal documents, again, policies, procedures, knowledge, or even things like the website, which presumably are kept up to date and are maintained. And you know, why not have a bot from day one that's searching your website, which, you know, is equivalent to one that, let's say, supports 80 intents that you had to handwrite yourself, right? But the intents are always going to be useful, and they should take precedence if you want to add them. We like to say that the future bots intents will be optional, but they'll still be useful. And you know, those are for the cases where you want to deliberately script a response based on what they're asking. You say, hey, I don't want to rely on the website for whatever reason, or maybe the website doesn't even have the information. Those are the cases where you might want to add an intent, or you might want to trigger certain rules to escalate callers or users to agents, to the lending staff, you know, collections, what have you. These are things that search aren't necessarily going to get you, but you want to layer on that control. You know, if I see that, let's get them to an agent. So intents will always have their place.
Matt, is there a difference between, I think there is, between the application of chat and voice because of that need to have low latency on voice? Can you not get that level of specificity or accuracy where you would have that in chat, where the latency isn't as big of a deal? Is that a fair way of looking at it?
Yeah, voice is a hard channel. It's harder for exactly that reason. You don't necessarily have the luxury of getting to wait 2, 3, 4 seconds to compute a response. When you're in a digital interaction and you at least have some indicator like the typing bubbles, it's like it's not a terrible experience to have to wait 3 seconds to get that answer. You know, we'd want to be like as fast as possible, and you know, that's the claim to fame of some companies like Perplexity, right? But with voice, like you need to be on it, like you need to be responding within, that 1.5 second max time frame to deliver that answer. And so what that ultimately means is voice does require a bit more thoughtful optimization into some of the algorithms we're using to generate or compute that response. And there's a spectrum of LLMs out there right now, some bigger, some larger. 4.0 Mini, for example, is offered by OpenAI. It's quite a bit faster. And so sometimes you might want to make a trade-off, like, oh, let's use a slightly smaller LLM for polishing that response at the very end. And so there's ways of keeping that latency low and still delivering that very powerful feature. So yeah, like I would say mostly similar, but voice introduces a few challenges that need to be considered on top.
Is that OpenAI Mini, is that the model that is used behind their advanced voice mode? Or is it something different? Because the only reason I'm asking is I'm always blown away by their advanced voice mode and the low latency and how natural and conversational that is. It's incredible. I was just curious if it's using a different type of model for that. I didn't know which model they used.
Yeah,
I think it's its model, because I think they said it was natively multimodal on voice, and I'm not sure that 4.0 Mini is that.
Okay.
Not completely sure, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it's its own product that, at least so far, they've kept pretty close to their chest.
And then, I mean, from a solution standpoint, because you guys did a demo yesterday of voice, and you kind of had what exists today, which was good, and then what you're planning on rolling out, which was very good. And that reminded me of kind of like ChatGPT voice versus ChatGPT advanced voice mode. I thought that was pretty amazing, that direction you guys are headed. And it sounded like a number of the people on that call were pretty impressed with that as well.
Yeah, it's fun to get to interact with the audience. What should I ask the assistant? And literally just take it at face value. What they typed into the chat during that webinar, I asked the assistant. It's pretty cool. Yeah, that was an aspirational, vision. That's where we see the future of voice assistants heading. Is that level of UX? But there's some work to do to get there, right? If you deployed that in production, you'd very quickly run into some very grave challenges and problems. And so it's really this journey of how do you continue to push the envelope on providing more convenient, more intelligent, sharper, quicker UX, while still maintaining the control needed. We want to give our clients the control they need for any use case as we push that envelope towards that vision. So it'll be a journey, and we have hard people. We have great people thinking about this hard problem.
Yeah, that's one thing I want to call out, Larry, is the danger of, I think first of all, like, it's really important that banks and Canadians get more educated into this technology, because the demo that Matt showed yesterday was basically a demo where we stripped away all the guardrails, and when you strip away all the guardrails, it demos super well. Like, as you saw, like, it's a really awesome demo. The hard part is getting it to do all of that with all the guardrails that we need to enforce as well. But I think one of the things we might see in the market, especially in kind of the hype way we're in, is that vendors leaning into that no guardrail demo that's really impressive, and financial institutions not necessarily knowing that, right? Which is why we try to do webinars, we try to do stuff like this, partly to kind of just help educate the market.
Yeah, and you did a very good job of explaining ahead of time that trade-off between control and intelligence, and that's exactly an example of that situation. How, from a client standpoint, what are the products that you see your clients using most, and how do you help them navigate, like, from a use case standpoint? What do they roll out now? What do they roll out 6 months from now? What do they roll out a year from now? And how does that kind of fit with your product offerings?
Yeah, and we're always innovating too. Like, we didn't have Knowledge Assistant or Posh Answers, a year and a half ago. But yeah, we get asked a lot, like, where do I start with AI? And that's kind of your question as well. Our answer is, like, it really depends, right? Because again, like, AI is a tool. A tool is meant to solve problems. So part of it is kind of, showing them a mirror and saying like, well, what problems are you trying to solve? But if you were to just like ignore the problems that a FI has and just say like, where should people start? Starting internally is a pretty good one, because it's low risk, and it's often good to show the team that you're investing in them. Because I think a lot of the frontline staff has fears around AI, around their own, job security and stuff too. But by investing in technology that actually helps make their lives better, I think you kind of help address some of that concern. But once you're ready to start externally, I mean, there's easier ways to start. You can start, with something like Posh Answers, where we get clients up and running within a day. Or you can jump into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, with voice, where it's, a lot more moving parts to it. But, that's arguably the lion's share of value and ROI when you do the really hard stuff.
And so from some of those benefits for the clients would ultimately be expense reduction, maybe first-time improvements in first-time resolution, reducing of call, hold times, things like that. Is that how your clients justify any investment in this? And then also there's a competitive aspect of it, right? So and let me also ask you, do you have these solutions in multiple languages, given that large language models really excel at that, right? So then from a competitive standpoint, if you're a credit union or community bank that can serve a lot more of your customers or members in the dialect they prefer, and can be there 24/7, 265, 365, whatever, then from a competitive standpoint, you're doing a better job serving those customers and members than the community bank down or the credit union down the street. Is that another argument for like utilizing these technologies? Because companies don't want to just adopt technology for technology's sake. To your point, they want to solve a problem and do a better job of serving their customers or members or offering new products, right?
Yeah, definitely. And the multilingual nature of these models, it makes multilingual suddenly a lot easier than maybe in years past. Like you get a little bit of a free lunch in terms of language support. But at the same time, you still have to build guardrails around new languages, right? So, with things like Knowledge Assistant, you could ask something in Thai or in Portuguese or, Chinese or whatever. And, we generally support most major languages. When it comes to member-facing use cases like our voice assistant, theoretically, yes. Like theoretically, we could be pretty multilingual fast too, but we want to do it the right way, and we're trying to ensure that we have the right guardrails even as we expand other languages, because each of those innovations expands the surface area of also things that could go wrong, and so we have to do things the right way, especially when they're member facing or customer facing. To your first point though, around value, I think what we're going to see in the future too is like it's been powerful to justify AI from a bottom line cost savings angle. I think that's like pretty obvious in terms of headcount savings, not having to have after hours overflow, like all these pretty expensive line items. Like people are the biggest line item. Third party BPOs are a really big line item. But what we're starting to see as well with more personalized AI and things like Posh Answers that are really rooted in people searching for something is that there's a lot of value, I think, coming and already here, but definitely coming around the top line revenue side of things as well. Right. And that's something that excites me in the long run, because you can only save someone so much money. There's a finite amount of money you can typically save, but there's no cap on how much you could technically make, right? And I think from a FI standpoint, like there's a lot of room to do better on personalization, top line growth, all that too. And I think that's something that AI is going to really open the doors for as well.
Yeah, I think
sure.
a good example of some of that would be, was it Affirm, the buy now, pay later provider that rolled out AI, or am I thinking of another buy now,
Klarna.
pay later?
Klarna.
Klarna,
Swedish.
yeah.
Yeah.
Klarna. Yep, that's right. That was a great example of it, at least from an expense reduction, but they drove bottom line results for them, pretty significant. Good. Well, we're coming up on the hour here. I want to just give anyone an opportunity to ask a question that we didn't cover. And then for those folks that, again, this is going to be recorded. A lot of people are going to watch the recording. For them to get in contact with you guys, your website is posh.ai. Certainly they're welcome to reach out to us or reach out to you guys directly. But is there any other way that they should be reaching out or contacting you guys if they're interested?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn these days, so they can also reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Okay, so any questions from the group? It's a pretty small group today, but I want to give you guys an opportunity to ask. Connor, any last questions from you?
Yeah, it's a bit more of like speculative, but in the future where we have more Gen AI based bots that are hooked up to actually be able to do things, via service calls, APIs, right? Whether it's someone paying off a loan or transferring money, what have you. How much do we have to worry about people jailbreaking the models and basically adversarial attacks that are tailored to Gen AI once it's actually able to take actions and not just return information?
So you're talking about agentic, right?
Not necessarily. Even, I mean, you could hook up an LLM today and give it API outputs and have it transfer money between accounts. And then if someone jailbreaks it and says, transfer all this money to this account number, it might do it. Right. So this is for that scenario. Now, I know of basically no one who's at least admitted to hooking up Gen AI to like transfer money. But in this future where we have Gen AI that's actually able to take actions, because that's always important for conversational AI and automating intents. That's something that we should expect and be looking towards.
Yeah. We should be all responsible and worried. Like, people building those technologies should be responsible, and generally speaking, I think we should all be a little bit worried. And there should in fact be a whole new form of diligence around those use cases. I like to think of SQL, like LLM to SQL is a great example. Like, you have an LLM, basically translating your natural language queries into a database query, and that's an easy example where it could generate something horrible and classic like drop tables and just like boom, your database deleted. What that would require is more guardrails and let's say certain checks on the kind of queries that it can generate. If you see the word drop, don't run the query. And so there'll be all kinds of different things you could layer on to basically validate that these bad things aren't being injected into the API request. Same idea with classic SQL injection, attacks that have existed for decades, but those validation rules are going to get a lot more sophisticated as Gen AI leads into these use cases.
Back in the day, when I was writing SQL code, and it might have been the last time I wrote SQL code. Apparently, I created an infinite loop, and the IT department came in, and knocked on my office door, and shut it down pretty quick. But I learned not to do that anymore.
You can DOS your machine.
Anything you guys want to wrap up with, in a minute or two from your side?
Want to go first, Matt?
Sure. Well, yeah. Thanks for having us. It's always fun to talk about AI. I love getting into some of the fanatical, long-term predictions, but I also like to stay grounded, stay realistic. I think nothing is ever quite exciting or unexciting as it seems. It's probably the right answer, probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, sure. And appreciate you guys having us. One thing I'll just add too is that I talked about the importance of credit unions, community banks being educated on this technology. Personally, I've been on the road a lot over the last year and a half, like somewhat to conferences and stuff, but a lot to individual board meetings and like leadership team meetings, because I think it's really important that at the board level, especially the FIs, like understand that this is something to not just like kick down the road. This technology is adding real value right now, and when you're dealing with an exponential curve, falling behind is even more risky when the curve is exponential. So please try to learn more about AI. Posh can be a resource. There's a lot of other great resources out there. So we just continue to encourage FIs out there to not be scared and shy away, but like actually get their feet wet and try to find good partners to help learn more about this.
Yeah, we'll put a plug in for ourselves here. We Connor and I both have been doing quite a bit of board presentations and conferences, and it's one of those things where like the more of us that can be out there letting people know this is not a technology that's going away. This has substantial impacts businesses and ultimately society. We all need to be as educated on this as possible. So with that, I will thank you for your time today. This has been a great conversation. I look forward to sharing the video with others, and then hopefully we can have some follow-up conversations around this. This was really a good talk, and love to spend some more time going through demos and stuff with you guys. Really helpful today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining our webinar yesterday, and I can't believe it's been over an hour. This was definitely fun.